everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be interviewing UFC associate producer Mounir Darbaki. Typically my channel focuses on music and film, but I find that there is incredible artistry in the UFC Countdown series on YouTube, which Mounir helps to produce. So with that being said, I'd love to give Mounir the chance to introduce himself briefly to my audience.
Hello, everyone. As she mentioned earlier, my name is Mounir Darbaki. Sometimes I go by Mounir Peterson Darbaki. That's my full legal name, but I shorten it to Darbaki just for simplicity's sake. As she mentioned earlier, I'm a associate producer for the UFC, particularly for the UFC Countdown series. And what that show is essentially a 48-minute docu-style series that airs 1 week prior to every pay-per-view event. So all of the massive events that have most of our bigger named fighters or champions that are featured in the main event and in the co-main events of these events. And essentially, if you want, I can just go get into the workflow about how we actually produce the show.
Yeah, well, to start, I'd like to ask you what initially drew you to the UFC?
Ah, that's a really good question. So back in 2015, I stopped playing college soccer. I was a soccer player my entire life. My family's background actually is from soccer. My father played professionally for about 13 years in Morocco, Portugal, Spain, France, and Libya. So
Oh,
I was raised in a family of five boys, and we all played soccer.
wow.
But after my freshman year of college soccer, I kind of fell out of love with soccer, and I was seeking something to replace that competitive outlet that I'm into sports and everything. And
Yeah.
I discovered boxing and MMA. And my twin brother and I began watching the UFC around that time, around 2014, 2015. And obviously, that's when Conor McGregor was blowing up. And it's funny because we found a Japanese MMA organization on YouTube called Pride, which the UFC actually bought years and years ago. But we found like old footage of their events and everything. So that's what like sparked my interest in MMA. And after I graduated college, my twin brother and I began working with an MMA promotion called Ryzen, which they're the same group of people that created Pride, which the UFC bought, and they started up a new promotion, essentially with the same people, the same CEO, the same marketing staff, the same video staff, everything.
Wow.
And I worked with them for about 2.5 years, almost 3 years, and I connected with someone from the UFC on the Countdown team, and that's how actually I got my foot in the door to do an interview and everything. That's how I actually got started with the UFC.
It's amazing. Having worked closely with Dana White, what have you learned from his leadership style or creative vision for how fights are presented?
So Dana, I actually gained a much deeper appreciation for him once I started working with the UFC. He's very hands on in his approach. He actually pays attention to what the fans want, and
Yeah.
oftentimes you see in other combat sports, namely boxing, it's in his own words, he says it's a going out of business sale where they're just trying to grab as much money as they can, and they don't really care who gets harmed in the process, and they don't really reinvest into the sport. So that's his number one criteria for making fights is he's always trying to put on the biggest, most interesting fights that make the most sense, and it helps grow the sport as well. He takes a lot of the money and reinvests it into the sport. In regards to the Countdown series, he gives us a lot of creative freedom to approach the story however we want. I got hired on as a video editor, and my the showrunner for the show at the time, his name was Mike Pacheco, a very good producer. He actually noticed that my depth of knowledge in the sport actually gave me a pretty good edge if I wanted to go down the producer route, and he actually gave me free reign to go down the producer route as well. So I was editing and producing ever since day one when I got hired. And oftentimes what we see from people in the production industry is they're good at the technical side, namely like choosing which cameras they want to use, what shots we want to get, et cetera, et cetera. But not many of them in the MMA space are MMA like nerds or MMA enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So they don't really know how to approach storytelling. They don't know the background of the fighters' careers, who the fighters' coaches were, what rivalries existed in the past, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to that, we can choose to approach it however we want. We'll put together the show over the course of about a month and a half. The week before we deliver it to ESPN, because ESPN was our content partner for the past 7 years. The week before we deliver it to them, we send it to Dana White. We send it to the executive, VPs and whatnot, and then they give us our notes. We address the notes and send it off. He actually, as the years went on, he became less and less involved in the process. Back in like 2007, 2008, he was very, very heavily involved in the editing rooms when the show was being created.
Yeah.
But as of recently, he's given us a lot of room.
That's kind of a nice segue because you touched on storytelling. And back in the mid 90s, Senator John McCain famously called the UFC human cockfighting. Then Dana White, through his Ultimate Fighter show, he helped to shift public perception and um, really just humanize the sport. So, in your work as associate producer, creating the countdown series and the highlight packages as well, how do you continue that mission of telling authentic stories?
An important thing to take note of when you're consuming content about MMA is it's not just sport, it's also entertainment. Um, Oftentimes, and this is something that I've noticed as of recently in the MMA industry as a whole, is that it's often okay, number one versus number two or three. He has X amount of wins and X amount of losses. Most fans don't really care about that. They actually care about who the fighters are as a person and what problems they have to resolve in this upcoming fight. So, for example, if there's a heated rivalry, the most popular one in history, in MMA history, is Khabib versus Conor. There's so much back and forth involved in that fight, regardless of the logistics of, Conor should have kept the belt or not, or why did he get stripped, and etc. No one really cared about that. What they cared about is this guy doesn't like this guy. Here's all their back and forths, and we want to see it resolved. We want to see, the climax of the event.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's one big approach to how we tell stories. Another thing is, what else is going on in the fighter's life? Do they have kids? Do they have a very distinct background story? In the example of Habib, he came from a region called Dagestan, which for a large majority of MMA history, people kind of they weren't familiar with that region, and it was very difficult for fighters to get signed to the UFC from that region. But with Khabib's arrival into the UFC, it actually started like a waterfall of so many fighters from that region entering into the UFC, and a lot of their stories are very unique. With Khabib, he got raised by his father, who coached over 20 or 30 world champions in MMA, sambo, judo, et cetera, et cetera. And that story of his blew up and caught the attention of so many fans. Who's this undefeated guy from Russia? He used to wrestle with bears when he was a kid, and he fights with he fights for his father, et cetera. And then eventually his father passed away. It's the personal stories like that that really grab fans' attention and imagination. Conor as well. Conor has a similar story like that.
On a more technical side, can you kind of walk me through what a typical production cycle looks like from concept to final edit?
For sure. So as soon as the fights get announced, that's when we really step up gears in terms of research and pre-production. So what happens is, let's say for example, UFC 323 is on December 7th here in Las Vegas. We started the research process as far back as 317, actually, which was in June, I believe, because the flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja, faced off with the next contender that he was going to fight. So we always knew in the back of our minds that fight was next. We just didn't know when the date was going to be. So we had research already prepped for that fight. We look at the fighter's social medias. We look at previous content packages that we've produced or that the fighter has produced. We decide based on how much time we allocate to them in the show, what story angles we want to focus on, and what we're looking to capture when we actually do shoot with the fighter. So that we have to grab a master interview, which is a sit down interview in a very specific location, usually the gym or the fighter's house, and we want to touch on specific topics. Obviously, we have to talk about them training and their upcoming fight, but we also want to talk about what's going on in their personal life, how best to capture that. So, for example, with Joshua Van, we knew that he fought 5 times this year so far, and back in June he bought his mother a house, and he came from a poor family. So for the fact that he was able to fight so many times and buy his mother a brand new house, and he could potentially become the second youngest UFC champion in history, we all knew that that's what we wanted to capture. So we compiled archival of footage of him gifting his mother the house. They had a surprise party at the home, et cetera, et cetera. But we also captured him having lunch at home with his mother, and we actually interviewed his mother. In terms of Pantoja, it's a very similar thing. When this is an issue we run into with champions who've been in Countdown a lot, it's very hard to tell their story in a different way. And if we've already covered, the story angle of his kids and his wife and how long his journey was to the title, he lost the big fights and then won eventually. That can get repetitive, and unfortunately, we do end up telling the same story a few times. But that's what the pre-production process looks like. We write questions for a master interview. We scout locations that we want to film at, and then we actually reach out to the managers and the fighters to book the shoot dates.
Your storytelling instincts really shape the tone of each episode. Where do you draw that inspiration from? Are there any particular films, documentaries, or even personal experiences that influence how you tell these stories?
Because my career path into the industry is very untraditional. I didn't go to film school.
Mhm.
I'm not a film buff. I did take courses in college about video production and film production, and visual communication as well. But because I'm such an MMA nut, I rely a lot on the content that I've consumed in the past, what worked and what didn't work. Because I have a strong familiarity with fighter storylines, different arcs in their careers, different stories about how they met their coaches and their coaches' rivalries with other gyms, et cetera, et cetera. I often try to reflect on that and draw comparisons between these two scenarios and see how did the UFC tell this story before? Why didn't it work? How can we make it work? That's typically my approach. And I consume a lot of sports documentaries as well. That's I would say after college, I really began to focus on that because I wanted to take the more traditional approaches and implement them into my storytelling approaches.
So you kind of approach it as a fan.
Yes, and that's a very,
Yeah.
very I almost want to say a fresh perspective
Yeah.
because you get a lot of traditional filmmakers who want to tell stories a certain way, but it's MMA. It's a very uncontrolled environment. The athletes are not like actors or musicians or stage actors. It's very, very different environment. So
Yeah.
approaching it with the understanding of how fighters are and how raw their stories can be, um, it's good to have different perspectives on how to approach telling their stories.
Sports can be as emotional as cinema. There are triumphs, rivalries, and heartbreaks. How do you capture that emotional intensity in a way that feels real and not staged?
That's a very good question. I will say, oftentimes when we're speaking with fighters about specifically when I'm conducting interviews with fighters, I really do try to first of all, they have to feel comfortable answering the questions on camera. Many fighters are not media trained. They get nervous. They get hit in the head for a living. So sometimes they really feel out of place when they're on camera. But when you are able to, this is what I did in a lot of my field productions with the fighters. I asked them about what was it like training with this fighter back in the day? What was it like fighting against this fighter back in the day? Such a legendary fighter. And these are fights that not many fans know about, but people who are in the know are very familiar with. And it helps build a specific kind of rapport with the fighter that they don't typically get with producers. Most producers, honestly, and I've witnessed this, firsthand experience. They kind of just get in and do their job. They say, "Oh yeah, so they asked me to ask you this," and it really feels impersonal. Not really connected. But when I'm sitting down with fighters, I really do try to make an effort to make them feel comfortable and that I care about their story because I really do.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to capturing emotional moments in a fighter's career or an upcoming moment in their career, we really try to ask a question in a more open-ended manner. Oftentimes, you'll get people asking questions like, "What was it like when you won the title?" It's like it felt great. What else is a fighter gonna say? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? We try to ask them like, in the case of Alexandre Pantoja, we learned after the fact that when he first won the title, that his father actually left his family when he was at a very young age. So when he won the title, he looked into the camera and said, "Are you proud of me now, Dad? Are you proud of me?" So
Yeah.
we really try to delicately get them to talk about those things. We don't even ask them about fighting. We ask them about that moment specifically because fighting is like it's obviously what they do. It's their occupation,
Yeah.
but we want to angle it in a way that makes it feel more intimate. It's kind of hard to explain.
Like really hone on the emotional beats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously, the way that we edit it helps a lot. Like we have the best editor. I will say we have one of the best editors in the world in terms of like sports
Yeah.
media.
Prepping for
Um,
this interview, I've seen a few of the videos and they really do tug at the heartstrings. Like they're really
yes,
emotionally resonant. Yeah.
yep. And we do touch on very delicate situations. Like some female athletes, they suffered sexual abuse when they were young. Kayla Harrison, she's the women's bantamweight champion. She was sexually abused when she was young, and she's a two-time gold medalist in judo. She's the only American to ever win gold at the Olympics in judo, and she actually suffered it at the hands of one of her judo coaches. So that was a big story that
Yeah.
not many fans knew about going into her UFC debut. So the way we approached that was very delicate.
Yeah.
We made sure that she was comfortable talking about it, which she was, but we also have to be very careful how we word our questions and make her feel comfortable when she's on camera.
Definitely. With multiple events happening globally, how do you manage the chaos of scheduling shoots, coordinating with fighters across time zones, and keeping the creative quality consistent?
Well, first of all, we have a pretty big team. We have a team of about four producers, six editors. Two of them are in house, four of them are freelance, and sometimes we pull in extra editors. Um, when we're booking shoots with fighters from Russia, Brazil, China, sometimes uh, England, France, all over the world, not only do we have to coordinate with the fighters and their managers which shoot dates work, but when we get the media back, we have to send it off for translation, which takes even more time.
Yeah.
Um, we have a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? We have a very specific workflow, a lot of steps in place to ensure that everything is done optimally. And unfortunately, we run into situations where fights fall out and we have to make do with what we have. On 13 days' notice, I had to go and film with Alex Pereira out in Danbury, Connecticut. It was supposed to be Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler at UFC 303. 14 days before the event, Conor McGregor pulls out with an injury. So on short notice, we reached out to Alex Pereira's management as soon as we heard that he was stepping in to fight in the main event.
Yeah.
Reached out to his management, booked a shoot day with him, and I flew out to Danbury, Connecticut. And I'm not fluent. He's Brazilian. I'm not fluent in Portuguese, but my Portuguese is good enough to conduct an interview in. Like I can read a question to him and understand what he's saying, and ask him to, hey, can you phrase it this way instead? It sounds better. So in one day, we shot all of our promo material. We shot a training session and the master interview all in one day, which is a pretty productive day. Most fighters they kind of feel overwhelmed when you're with them the entire day, but Alex is very
Yeah.
professional about it. And that's just one example of things that we have to do to turn a show in. And it's not like, oh, it's 20 minutes of a show. No, it's a 48-minute long show. We have to recap the fighters' careers, their personal lives, and what the upcoming fight means to them. So doing that with with team fighters from all over the world, it takes a really robust workflow.
You filmed and produced content around so many incredible fighters, from veterans like Dustin Poirier and Israel Adesanya to rising stars like Ilia Topuria and Sean O'Malley. Who are some of your favorite fighters to work with, and what makes them stand out on or off camera?
My personal favorite fighter to film with is Marab Dwalishvili. And it's because he's really just a normal person, a very, very humble guy. And he's presented himself that way. When
Yeah.
he was on his come up in the UFC, a lot of fans didn't like him, whether it was like the way he looked, the way he talked, the way he fought, whatever it was. Many fans didn't like him. And even me personally, when I was watching him coming up, I wasn't the biggest fan of his. But after getting to work with him and seeing how humble he is despite all the success he's had, he literally holds all the records in his division. He's one of the most dominant champions right now in the UFC. But like just spending time with him and seeing how he treats the people close to him in his life
Yeah.
really won me over. And the fact that he fights through any situation, short notice, injuries, infections. He makes no excuses. He goes out there and wins, and he beats the best guys in the world. And just seeing good people win in life, it's a really warming thing. You know what I mean?
Every fighter has a story, and I imagine that you see sides of them that fans typically do not. The nerves before weigh-ins, the quiet moments backstage. Was there a particular fighter or shoot that stayed with you emotionally?
Let me think about this one. Um, when I filmed with Habib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, and Umar Nurmagomedov, it was out here in Las Vegas. They were two of them were fighting actually. Habib was coaching both. He was coaching both of them in the upcoming event, and that was one thing that was a shoot that I really wanted to take part in because Habib's a big inspiration for, not only for me but for a lot of other Muslims around the world. And to speak to him about his father, the vision his father had for him and his teammate Islam Makhachev and his younger cousins. Uh, it's surreal looking back at it. Obviously, in the moment, I'm maintaining a very professional image and behavior because that's what's required of me, and it makes the shoots go a lot smoother. When fighters detect that you're a fan, they lose respect for you, and I learned that back in my days in Japan when I was working for Ryzen.
Yeah.
Um, it's one thing to read about it online or to watch a video about it, but when you're actually there with them and you can feel the dedication that these fighters have when they're training for a world title. Like it's the biggest fight of their life, and things can get intense, things can get choppy. They're telling you to shut the camera off. They're telling you, no, 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 don't record this. Okay, now you can record. uh you feel the pressure for sure.
Yeah. For any young editors or aspiring producers watching this, what is some advice that you have for them breaking into this fast-paced industry?
As big as the sport of MMA is, the industry is very small. There's only two big players in the world at the moment, and the UFC is far ahead of the rest of the competitors. Reach out to people, do be willing to work for free. It's what I did when I started working for Ryzen. Um, don't be afraid to take initiative to create your own content if no windows are if no windows of opportunity present themselves to you. And do this sounds cliche, but do what you actually enjoy doing. If you enjoy storytelling, dedicate yourself to getting better at that. If you enjoy videography, dedicate yourself to getting better at that. If you enjoy editing, dedicate yourself to getting better at that. Don't spread yourself too thin trying to scrape any opportunity you can, but uh yeah, dedicate your don't spread yourself thin. Go deep on one area. That's what I would suggest.
You've helped immortalize some of the most iconic moments in combat sports. When people look back years from now, what kind of legacy do you want your work in the UFC to leave?
Ideally, because as big as UFC Countdown is, I would say Countdown and Embedded are the two most watched shows in MMA currently. As big as those shows are, ideally, I would be a part of more original long form series, such as documentaries that focus on one specific fighter.
Yeah.
And while we do have certain projects that have been on and off throughout the past couple of years, I'm really hoping that we get around to finalizing a Habib documentary.
Yeah.
And I personally would really like to produce a documentary about the the rise and fall of Pride, which was the Japanese MMA promotion that the UFC bought, and really the UFC started to take off after they purchased that promotion. Um, and I just want I with those two documentaries, hopefully, I inspire people to not only like train MMA and get interested in the sport, but also be able to walk away from those viewing experiences wanting to tell stories of any kind. It doesn't matter what kind of sport it is, what interest it is. They were able to see this story, see the ups, the downs, all the different character development, the story arcs, and take that as inspiration to go and tell their own stories. Because that's honestly my other interests, such as soccer, some esports documentaries, and not only did they leave me with fond memories, but they also gave me motivation to create my own content in the future.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end the interview. So I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your insights into storytelling and production at the UFC.
Thank you so much. It's a big team, so I'm not going to take all the credit, but I'm happy I could share my experiences.
Everyone, I will have Mounir's links and socials in the comments in the description box below. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe.